So you're saying in Wilds it's my greatsword that will give me focus?
I gotta tell you, this is pretty terrific.
Hello, my fellow hunters then, and welcome to a little bit of a chat when it comes to the skills system in Wilds. The move to offensive on your weapons and utility/defensive on your armor as a kind of general overview. Though, before any of that, of course, I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, and I hope you're in line for a wonderful New Year's too, and, well, I think we might all be in line for a lovely 2025 in general, given, you know, Wilds. Oh my god, I can't wait to be grabbed by the Black Flame. In any case, focus, self. The skills, then. There's been a lot of interesting discourse back and forth on the now full sort of confirmation revealing community update examples of, yeah, just how this skill system we kind of knew was a thing is going to sort of implement. And the TLDR of, hey, you choose a weapon, it's got like crit I1 on it, you upgrade it through the trees, and now once you've reached the final rarity, it's got like crit I4, weakness exploit 2, and focus 1, with a couple of jewel slots to round that out, and there is your offensive skill package. Everything else, your armor, is going to be like your speed eating, or your evade window, or your constitution. And look, in a nutshell, in a vacuum on the surface, that's just kind of fine, right? Like, it's not really a huge deal exactly where the skills come from, even if we end up in a situation where we have slightly less offensive skills stacked up than we're used to in Iceborne and Sunbreak, where we had, I'll be honest, I do think probably too much, just pages of the things, but that doesn't actually matter, because what matters is the balance of the game. If the monsters and the hunts are balanced for you having 5 max defensive skills, then it's going to feel exactly the same as Iceborne, like Fatalis, being balanced for you having 12 offensive skills. So that's kind of a non-issue, and yes, the immediate thing that gets brought up is damage is fun, more damage skills, more fun. But again, damage is fun in the sense that you're killing the monster faster because you've got a highly efficient, optimized setup with a lot of damage. But you can still do that with relative balance of the game according to the less offensive skills they expect us to have. You'll still be able to do a keenly tuned offensive grouping of skills just surrounding your weapon and its jewel slots instead. If the average build kills a monster in 10 minutes and the optimized build kills it in 5 minutes, doesn't really matter if that optimized 5 minutes is doing it with 20 offensive skills or 3, it still feels powerful because it is, if that makes sense. The only real change is just not seeing 3 pages of stuff when you open up your equipment info. Though I do think I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't think, generally speaking, there's been like an outrageous, crazy negative reaction, or indeed a super opposite, like, yeah, this is the best thing ever reaction. I think everyone, like me, to the most part, is kind of here like, interesting, let's see how it plays out. But I do think it's definitely worthwhile and fun to talk about how I see it playing out before we actually get there, and that's kind of where we're going with this. So, feeling-wise, I think the power fantasy of lots of skills do big damage is going to remain fairly similar because that's mostly tied to the balance of the game relative to the sets they expect us to be in. And that's kind of okay. We've also seen that they're lowering the max rank of some of the skills to presumably make them easier to cap out with the less space that we have, like Crit I having 5 ranks. Assuming it's just not scaled weaker in general across those 5 ranks, but we don't exactly know yet. But to get to the gammoth in the room, the reason that they have given for this whole change of weapons being offensive skills is so that when you swap weapons, you don't suddenly have a pile of useless for that weapon skills still sat on your armor. And I think that is an admirable goal, and it makes sense initially. But I am concerned, I do worry that most people will just use their favorite weapon and essentially hardly ever swap to their other weapon. There might be niche situations, or just for the fun of it for a little bit, but I think for the most part, hunters tend to be quite attached to their favorite main weapon, and then they will hunt with it. And even if you're someone who likes to swap around your weaponry, you will swap and then use the thing you've swapped to primarily until you want to swap again. It's hard to say without actually, playing the game fully and properly, but at least for me, and especially in the beta, the idea of just sort of on the fly swapping backwards and forwards, zone to zone, in the same hunt against the same monster, just didn't feel like something I wanted to do necessarily, because I just wanted to keep using the greatsword. But I certainly don't speak for everyone when I say that, and I would love your thoughts on how you treat that. Is the weapon swapping something you're especially seeing yourself doing, and things like, oh, the X monster has enraged, so I'm going to stop using this weapon and now swap to this weapon because it's better at dealing with that monster when it's enraged. I think that's the, lofty, ideal goal of this system, but is that actually going to play out? And if it doesn't, then this shift of skill location to allow for a second weapon swapping on the fly that most people might not do is going to backfire. But I don't think backfire in a way that's actually that bad, because I think even in the world where we only have one weapon choice, even then, having offensive skills on weapons and the rest on armor is still a healthy decision for the game, and something that I personally really support trying, at least for a generation. And that's what I think is most fascinating about this. I think whether you agree it's a good decision or not to do this because of the two weapons actually doesn't matter, because I think this is just a good decision to do in general, irrelevant of two weapons and weapon swapping. I don't agree that it restricts build, creativity, or diversity. I've seen a lot of people say that, and it makes me scratch my head because I think it actually does the opposite. Let's use Monster Hunter World as an example. So here we are then with my greatsword build at the end of Iceborne. There's a lot of skills going on here, and most of them offensive. Still a lot less than what happened in Sunbreak, but it's a fairly meaty wall of damage. Attack boost, crit eye, agitator, boost, exploit, focus, coalescence, holy god. And yeah, this is perhaps overkill. And while yes, there is divine blessing, recovery up, and evade window, it's not really an argument in favor of, look, this didn't need to happen, we've still got these utility defensive skills, because we didn't really, right? Evade window is just a holdover from the armor, it's just on there, that doesn't count. Then recovery up and divine blessing literally only exist because they added the jewel decorations to ironically try and achieve the same effect they're trying to achieve in Wilds with this utility offense weapon armor split. If there wasn't such a thing as a critical boost plus divine blessing decoration, this would just be critical boost. It certainly wouldn't be divine blessing instead of it. If the same thing here with coalescence and recovery up, it certainly would just be coalescence and not recovery up. So this is what I'm saying. These are here because we got split offensive utility decorations, which ironically made it really refreshing that we could work these cool utility defensive skills into a set without dropping offensive. Iceborne kind of started to sort of explore this idea of letting us actually get utility skills without feeling bad that we're dropping damage to do so. Because it's entirely possible that if they'd not added these decorations, and by possible I say 100% certain, this would be the exact same set, just without the divine blessing and recovery up. Because ultimately, that's the mentality of most people. It feels bad to not push your damage to the maximum. It feels like you're making a mistake dropping an offensive skill for utility. And it shouldn't. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of the utility and defensive skills are really fun. They're comfortable. They can make hunting a lot more enjoyable. Doing 5% more damage or making your dodge roll 3 times as long, the dodge roll is way more fun. But it's still that little itch in the back of your mind like saying, I'm choosing to do 5% less damage here, and a lot of people struggle with that, and there's nothing, again, wrong with that. So now in Wilds, I think that's where the healthiness of this split comes in that's irrelevant of the weapon swapping. Because now you can essentially guilt-free load your armor with all your favorite utility and defensive skills and know that it's not costing you damage in any way, shape, or form, while loading your weapon and its decoration slots with offensive skills, knowing you're doing the best you can there. You essentially get the best of both worlds. A little package, weapon and its slots to be as offensive as possible, and then a little package, your armor pieces, to be as defensive and as utility filled as possible. And then you marry those two groups into a build, as opposed to the entire package being let's get offensive as possible. Whether this actually works out and does feel better and is better, of course, is still, largely up in the air. But I think the potential of this system, where we now essentially have, here's the damage part of your set, here's the utility part of your set. You can push and theory craft both and bring them together, as opposed to just having that singular damage bubble that gets used for, singular damage. Because there are so many fun, worthwhile, not strictly offensive skills that you can bring into this. Something like Power Prolonger very rarely comes up, but it's nice to not have to manage your weapons as often. It's nice to have those extended durations. Before, you either took Power Prolonger or you took like Crit Boost 3, and that's not really a decision at all. Now you can whack Power Prolonger on your armor and just feel really good about it, because you've not had any opportunity cost offensively. The same with your stamina skills, like Constitution, like Marathon Runner. We can load up on stamina help for your dual blades and so on, again, without any offensive cost, presumably, and that actually feels quite good. You've got your things like Part Breaker. That can happen. No one really is going to use it outside of the few times it's been actually meta-relevant, like the Sunbreak skill, but now you could put it on and actually use it to farm parts without dropping any of your damage, because it's a utility skill and those go on your armor. Even something like Free Element, if that remains a thing in Wilds, being able to choose a weapon, fully draw out its element or status, and have that not cost you damage because it's categorized as a utility. That can open up some avenues. Even literal defenses. Having your resist and your actual defense skill on your armor pumped up to make you harder to kill without costing you damage is going to feel really fun and freeing and comfortable. And I don't think making hunts supremely more comfortable in a way that every spectrum of player, from the tryest of try-hard speedrunners, God bless their souls, they're ridiculous and incredible, all the way to, I'm really struggling to get past chatacabra, I don't know, that one guy out of 8 billion. Equally, those two camps can now load up on utility, defensive, and helpful skills to keep them alive and make hunting easier without feeling bad that they're losing damage. And I think that's actually quite exciting. Then even more niche stuff, like aquatic polar mobility. I doubt that will be a thing in Wilds, though maybe it will with the flooded forest and the probably frozen-y map we're going to get, as that will complete the quartet of elemental maps. But if we look at like the tar on the oil well basin, being able to make yourself able to move properly in it without costing damage, yeah, that's really, really cool again. And then you just kind of basic stuff like your recovery up, your health up, your stun resist, all of that just being free on your gear is fun. I'm kind of excited to see how the utility defensive armor meta develops alongside the offensive side of things. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And there is always the point that this means that we can use other armor visually and not just for its offensive capabilities. And while that is true, and there is a lot of beautiful armor, like the Duna little preview we got, my god, it's not as relevant because supposedly transmog is being unlocked fairly early into Wilds, and transmog kind of solves that problem in a better way anyway, so this really is just a mechanical thing. The only thing really left to say for me is what might actually torpedo this whole thing, and that's what they've chosen to categorize as offensive and not. If there are certain skills categorized as offensive that we all kind of think are really utility, that might be a shame. I know that Greatsword has focus on its weapons. So if I'm there having to choose a Focus 3 Greatsword to play it comfortably, knowing that I could be using like a Weakness Exploit 3 Greatsword, but you know, Focus is more important, that's where it might start to feel bad, and I wish Focus was a utility skill I could have on my armor, something like Rapid Morph that's on weapons for Charge Blade, that kind of thing. Guard and Guard Up on weapons, you might want that to be utility. Even Slugger for Hammer is on weapons when you think that that might be more utility to increase, you know, some status affliction, but then you would think things like Blast Up or Element Up are going to be offensive, so maybe it's been categorized because of that. That's the sticking point for me. What skills count as what, and is that going to feel wrong? But the actual system in a vacuum, I think, is actually going to be quite freeing, fun, and interesting to experiment with for at least this generation of Monster Hunter. So that's kind of where I sit with it. I would love to know your thoughts too, of course. But for now, like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.